as people said, you might familiar with the inland fishery, right? So now today we just would like you to think about the threats and issues concerned in your national and local fishery. And actually, as we know, when we would like to manage something, so we should know what is the root cause or the issue or the problem that occur in that area. So just would like you to think about broader, what is the threat or issue in the for the human, for the ecological, even the governance. Try to think about the threat and issue. And if you see in the table, we already put the color paper. So please write one paper, one issue. Yes, as P-Bird show you, that is the paper color, yes, in the table. So may I request for 3 issues per person? That is, you can, or maybe you can write more 3 issues, 5 or 10. Yes, yes, as much as you can. Yes. 3, yes, one issue per one paper. Yes, one card.
Your country is color coded. You have one person write 3, and then we want you to share and take out the duplicates. So just write down 3 that you're familiar with, and then discuss amongst you in the table. Issue that impacts on fisheries in the Mekong Basin. We talked a lot about them yesterday, so it's just a refresh really from yesterday. Hydroelectric. Irrigation. And can you use a big pen, because we're going to share the results of this card, and then share and take out any that are the same and discuss. Combine them for the table. Yep. All right. Up to you. You can have no more than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 18, because there's only 3. So for Vietnam, how many will you end up with? Which are the same? No, I want you to share now amongst yourself. And if he's got the same one as you've got, then you only need 1. Okay? Yeah, so work together. Pretty well there? Lots of issues in Vietnam. Okay, on the board here, we have a matrix: fisheries resources, environment, governance, human. So put your issue into the right box. Keep on forgetting. Otherwise I can't remember.
Yes, but you can see the color, right? So this is we divided into the fishery resources and environment, human, and the governance. So if you see in each part have the three color, except this one green, the Cambodia. Nah? Yes. No human. Very good. So you know have threat or issue in the human part, right? So it may be we need to think about more the human part. Yes, this is the issue that. So and the issue I think is almost the same, right? In each part, the environment you mentioned like for the climate change, the water pollution, the governance about the law, the management, poor management, and the fishery resources, overfishing, illegal fishing, and the human part, the population growth, something like that. Intensive agriculture.
Intensive agriculture from our colleagues from Lao PDRs. Actually, we don't know how to put which. Do you think this is an issue in human dimension or in environment? Okay. We just change. Okay, no, please.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much for your work hard. Kun Dilek, do you have any?
Yeah, okay. The first thing I think we learn from this is every country has very similar issues. The second thing is it's very hard to categorize. Every time you categorize, something doesn't fit in the box. But as humans, we like to think in categories. That's how we sort of process things in a system way. The other thing that I notice here, some of these are very, very high level, like climate change. Some are more specific, like a dam is a problem. When we do planning, it's going to be very important that we look at what can we manage. Can we manage climate change? Not really. So I call this a driver, a big forcing population growth and wealth. These are big things that are forcing the system. But we as fisheries managers, really, it's out of our control. So our management plan has to start picking up some of the things that we can manage. And overfishing is a good example, illegal fishing, habitat degradation, dams, and then some of these governance issues like the lack of cooperation among stakeholders. These are the things that we're looking for in our fisheries management. So drivers, the big ones, actions on the ground, the ones we're looking for. Any other comments about that? Yeah.
Just a quick comment on that. I think, I mean, climate change still is important to take into account, of course, but we will have to adapt the other things and take climate change into consideration, of course, in that respect.
Yeah. Double through. Again, from a fisheries point of view, are we contributing to that? It's impacting on fisheries, but is fisheries also contributing to that? So, yeah, I mean, this is a way of starting to start thinking logically about these issues. Yeah.
Just to come back to climate change, because I've been struggling with that for many years. The question which always comes up in my mind, if we do any kind of planning or whatever for fisheries management, is how do we operationalize climate change? And I cannot, after all these years, come up with an answer. That's why I completely agree that climate change is a driver and should be treated as a cross-cutting issue and not as a self-standing or standalone challenge or issue. That helps a lot to avoid unnecessary discussions.
Yeah, I think if I was to write this into a plan now, I would start with these drivers and say, because of climate change, population growth and wealth is affecting the fisheries in this way. So I'd have them there as a heading, so they're not forgotten. But I wouldn't go straight into my plan and say we're going to manage climate change. Because as Uli said, how do you do it? Any other comments about the threats and issues?
Yes, may I comment related with the climate change? This is marine and coastal marine. In SEAFDEC, we more strengthen on the safety at sea for the small-scale fisher. This coming from since the few years, weather is changed. The storm come from Philippines to Vietnam more and Thailand more, and impact to our fisher life in this region. They cannot go to sea, or even they go to sea, they risk themselves because big wave, bad weather, sea condition. So that's why SEAFDEC spend more money to promote the safety at sea for our fisher in this region. This is one of the adaptation that regional organization is try to help support to member country. We cannot change the climate change, but we try to adapt and stay with them.
I would like to make a suggestion. This comes from my experience writing fisheries strategies. I always treat governance as the first item to touch, because governance is the most important part of any natural resource management. Let's say the most important determinant of any natural resource management. I wrote one card which says good governance, good natural resource management, bad governance, bad natural resource management. You cannot have good natural resource management if you have bad governance. So I always put that as a reminder, or as somebody else said, natural resource management is a function of governance.
Okay.
I think it's a good kind of orientation to put it all in scale of importance.
I agree. How many of you have had actual experience in writing a management plan? Fisheries management plan, yeah? Yes, okay. Does it include governance? Yep, okay. So there's some people here with experience, and we can share that a bit later. Okay, any other comments about the threats and issues to inland fisheries. It's too loud. Volume.
Yeah, just I think I can see the threat and issue. Maybe one we are missing here is really
Put the volume
important.
down a little bit.
When we talk about the poor, I mean the depending on fishery, and they don't have any other sources. It's really important. Maybe the trade, no option, no other livelihood. They rely on fishery. If anything trade to these resources, they will die. Maybe I don't know. It's quite important when we talking about the poor and we want at the same time we want to conserve environment or fishery is quite really difficult. And the way to balance between the need and the conservation, we should consider this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The dependency of people on fisheries in these systems. Weak law enforcement. Poor limited participation of stakeholders. Trade-offs, that's an interesting one. Trade-offs between the economic, social and environment across the country. Decreased fisheries, what's this one? Decreased fisheries production. Lack of data. Poor monitoring. So there's some clusters there that are coming through. Okay, let's move on. Normally in these consultations, we start thinking about a vision, and we ask you to write a vision. However, we seem to have a vision, so I thought we'd just check on yesterday's vision and see if we still... Now, a vision is extremely important tool. Just about, I'd say 100% of the time, when you sit down with a group of people and ask them what they want things to be like in 20 or 30 years' time, there is an agreement. Then you ask them how we're going to get there, and there's the conflict. But the vision itself, so you've got a group of people here, and you say, do we share this vision? Is extremely important to start off any discussion. You remember our 4 headings: fisheries, resources, environment, human, governance. Here we've got collaboration, we've got environmental degradation, economically viable, socially acceptable, and technically appropriate. So for me, that covers a lot of the dimensions of ecosystem approach to fisheries. Any comments about that vision? Why do vision statements always get sort of difficult to say? This is environmentally non-degradation, economically viable, socially acceptable. It's just a long thing to have to say, but I think all the elements are there. Microphone. Okay.
So all the member countries have their inputs, and at the end we came up with this formulation. But as you are right, it's always difficult to write a vision which is not too wordy.
It's easier to actually draw the picture. Yeah. Yes, over the back here.
I think there also the issue of value, which is very subjective.
We've got economically viable, socially acceptable.
Yeah, even that for whom, viable for whom. I think a colleague from Laos just talking about some marginalized group of people who does not have any opportunities regarding lands and the location. They cannot move away. They have no place
I agree.
to move. Yeah.
But I guess that tends to be a national policy who are we doing this for? Is it for the marginalized poor people, or is it for export and more national income? I mean, there's always these trade-offs between these things. So your vision statement could include who the target is, but that's up to the country, I think. Yeah, Uli.
Just to remark on that, economically viable or economic viability is a definition in itself. That means cost and benefits balance. It does not address any kind of social issues. The social issues comes afterwards, socially acceptable. For example, you could have something which is socially acceptable, but if it's not economically viable, it will not last. It will go down the drain. So please consider these 4 elements as aspects which rest in themselves, and they are defined in themselves. Environmental non-degradation is clearly addressing environment. We don't go the environment down the drain. Economic viable, we don't spend more money than we get back. Socially acceptable, we want to be inclusive and include the poor as vulnerable people. And technically appropriate, if it's not technically appropriate, it will not work. So these make sense in themselves, but make sense in a holistic way only if you take them all together.
Yeah, then it becomes the issue of the trade-off among these.
Exactly. That's what management's all about. Trade-offs and allocation and negotiation. Okay, so there's a vision statement. I like to think of a vision as if I close my eyes and think of a lake, a reservoir, what would I want it to look like in 20 years' time compared with now? And again, working with stakeholders is a good way to say, okay, just think, how would you like this to look in 20 years' time compared with now? And that's where we're trying to, that's why we're managing, okay, to reach this vision. Yeah. Microphone over here, please.
I just have one question. Here we look at this maybe vision. It's more for the sustainable fishery or sustainable for the ecosystem. Because here we just see about the trade-off, environment and so on, about the economy. But how about the biodiversity conservation, something like this? Can we link with this vision?
What I see here is that the first statement says that we're here to manage fisheries, and we have to do it in an environmentally friendly way. So there's a link that this sets really the scene for, remember we're coming here from a fisheries perspective, okay? And we're looking at what impacts our fishery and what fishery impacts on the ecosystem. So I quite like this one as it sort of focuses in on the topic. So we're not managing the ecosystem, we're managing fisheries within the ecosystem. And we'll do more on that in a minute, later after. Okay, just before coffee break, some of you are writing some notes in your resource book. It's up to you whether you want to just take a note of the vision statements and just write them down, so that when somebody asks you next week, what is the vision for this plan, you can say it easily. So just a little bit of time for yourself if you want to use the exercise book. I always find a good idea, just jot down a few notes. You don't need the whole story. Yeah.
In this context, a question: is anybody recording these cards for posterity, or
we always keep them, and we'll take photos of them. We'll certainly record it as a photo, and then we'll have the cards. We'll make sure they're not lost. I always keep everything that comes out of a workshop like this, and we do that through management. So we could have develop and manage. Also, I guess in the marine fisheries, most of our fisheries are overdeveloped. So we're very careful and how we word those. They were overdeveloped 20, 30 years ago, and we're still trying to solve those problems. So if we have overfishing, we can't put in more fishing, but we can certainly put in more appropriate fishing to manage the problem. Is that?
So what I see missing from this discussion is you just address the issue of the past development. So there's elements of the time that we have not put in here.
Yeah.
Certain things we cannot change anything because our predecessors have done something already.
Of the development, where we're up to now, what happened along the way to reach this point, and therefore where do we go in the future. So yeah, I agree. A timeline is very important and again a nice tool. Uli.
Well, just to answer this, to come back to development and management, this is very often the major question, and it's also almost all the time a question which has very important political dimensions. The people who want to have growth, they want development, and the people who want to conserve resources or want to utilize resources sustainable, they want management. And I've been in discussions which went around for a long time where they said first management, second development, the other one first development, second management. It went around, became almost a dogfight sometimes. So the question is absolutely relevant.
No, but then it leads to the principle that's mentioned about precautionary principle. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to that later.
Yeah.
We do it with a balance. Okay, the trade-off between human well-being and environmental conservation. So we'll come to that after morning tea. Okay, so everybody's had time to write down some notes if they wanted to. We'll break now.